Greetings, my friends. Mkwann here. Today is Gregorian calendar, date March 29th, Gregorian calendar year 2024. That's their time-keeping mechanism, and what the time they're keeping is a particular timeline, and it's done that way by having on a baseline level of indoctrination for everybody to see the world and understand time from the same perspective. But you know and I know that there are many different perspectives, and when we begin to question and poke holes in the false times that they tell us, that a lot of the other falsities, particularly the false storylines or false narratives which are built upon false time, they all begin to fall apart. Emperor has no clothes. And so that is how we will begin our conversation today. It's been a bit of time since I last spoke. Well, it's been probably 21 days, maybe closer to 30. And the last time I spoke, I was in the Chestnut Hill neighborhood in Philadelphia, and I took a little bit of time and traveled down, spent some time in Florida, spent some time in Asheville, North Carolina, spent some time in Floyd, Virginia. Sarah J. Shakina, thank you very much for all your hospitality. But now I am back, and we're going to be talking about the eclipse. I've been talking about the eclipse probably since calendar year 2024 has begun. I've been talking about the eclipse specifically as it relates to the up-and-coming River and Stars ceremony tour. But today I want to talk, some real interesting things are in the mix, and I want to share my perspective for whatever that's worth. So let us jump right in. So a bunch of people who I know have brought to my attention a few videos and information which is being put out there, primarily from like a biblical prophecy sort of perspective as it relates to the eclipse. And it's certainly complementary to some of the ways I look at the eclipse. If you're not familiar with it, here are just like some examples. God's urgent warning to America, 2024 solar eclipse, end of times Bible prophecy, a startling message, will America face civil war? And I want to begin by talking about that. First off, I love this stuff. It's complementary. The perspective and the techniques which the people who put out this type of material, it's very synchromistic, though their context comes from a Bible perspective, and I think with synchromysticism, it is grounded. The difference is it's grounded more so in the fact that this is a mystery, and because it's a mystery, there's not really like a solid foundation besides your own experience. And so, in these types of synchromistic analysis from a biblical perspective, it's not so much the mystery is the point of reference, but the Bible itself. And so real interesting things which are said. I won't get into them. Perhaps you'll go watch some of these videos, do your own research, but I want to cut to the chase as it relates to my opinion. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of fear porn built into this, whether it's civil war, end of days, end of times, that sort of stuff. I don't think anything's going to happen. I think that the eclipse is going to come and it's going to go. And what we're seeing here is just in my opinion, a little bit of sensationalism. I tend to be a little bit suspect of anyone who makes predictions. I certainly never try to make predictions, or at least specific ones, and specifically about, like, anything about the nature of who's controlling reality. But the predictions usually, I think, are often self-serving, and they create a degree of magnetism to whoever's making them to get someone all excited about whatever it is they're predicting. But, the reason I don't think anything's going to happen is because this isn't my first rodeo. This is the nature of the paradigm. There's always something around the corner. And whatever the most present fear-mongering always seems to be based upon some degree of factualness, whether it's World War III, or whether it's the imminent collapse of the economy. There's always something right around the corner, and so whenever I see something like this, I don't take it too seriously, and I encourage no one else to take it too seriously. I've had some friends of mine, personal friends of mine, share the anxiety which they're holding as it relates to what may be coming, and I don't think there's any need to. Just go back and think about 2012. Think about how much was talked about 2012. Think about how much was talked about Y2K. Think about how much was talked about, like, coronavirus. Think about how much was talked about the vaccines. There's always something, which is around the corner, and it pulls us in, and it tends to be nothing. And whenever something does happen, it really, it catches us off guard. So, who knows? Maybe something might happen. I don't think it is. It will. So that's my general thought as it relates to this sort of stuff. But there is undoubtedly, this is a significant moment in time. And as I said, it's going to come and it's going to go. The one thing that doesn't change with all of this sort of like fear porn, regardless of where it's originating from, whether it's originating directly from official paradigm mouthpieces, or seemingly outside, the one thing that doesn't change is the lockstep movement to deeper and deeper interconnection with life and technology. That doesn't change. But yeah, this I don't think there's nothing to worry about. And if something happens, well, then you deal with it then. Just to go back in time, so who here remembers Comet Elenin or Comet Ison? This is back, I think, around 2011, and all of the talk about these two comets being the blue star Kachina of the Hopi prophecy. We can all breathe a sigh of relief. The so-called doomsday comet Elenin made its closest flyby on Earth on Sunday, and no cataclysms ensued. This was one which I put a lot of I put a lot of energy into this when this came around, and this is one of the reasons why I can say with a greater level of confidence, I don't think anything's going to happen, because I've gone through this enough times, and there were so many markers with Comet Elenin, and the 9/11 was embedded in the name, and there was a lot of earthquakes that seemed to correspond to alignments between the comet and the Earth and the Moon and the Sun as it was getting closer and closer to Earth, and it really seemed to be something, and nothing that happened. And same thing was said with Comet Ison. This was after it was discovered in 2012. Some media sources called Comet Ison the comet of the century, speculated that it might outshine the full moon, and turned out to be nothing. And I pulled this slide back when I used to really be on top of all of the conspiracy stuff. There was a time where I just consumed so much information, and I consume very, very little now. But there's a website called Godlike Productions, which was a great conspiratorial lunatic fringe message board website, still around. And I just did a quick search when I was preparing these slides, and I just typed in Civil War, and this is the results, and you could see 2020, 2019, 2018, 2016, there've been calls for civil war, and certainly we can see that there's a lot changing in culture. Paradigm is undoubtedly changing. The way that we are living is changing, as the old way of control is moving towards another way of control, all being grounded in, technology. So we're moving towards Web 3.0, and, everything's on the blockchain and the tokenization of everything. Like, that's where it's going. All the other stuff is just to keep your attention elsewhere, as the constant movement brings you towards that particular timeline, which in narrative, which is trying to be brought into existence. Whether it is and whether it will happen. That's what we're looking at right now, on this particular YouTube channel. You as a viewer, me as the guy who's making these videos, is bringing awareness into the nature of reality, how reality is created, how it's manipulated. At least from my perspective, at least from my intention, not from the perspective that I'm going to fight it and change it, but to bring awareness to it with the thought that it is through awareness, which is happening in the collective unconsciousness, that middle paths, third paths, something else can occur. So let's go and jump into really what I want to talk about in this video, which is other weird stuff as it relates to this eclipse. This eclipse is undoubtedly charged. Whether it's the charge of the biblical perspective, or whether it's a charge of, what I'm going to be talking about in a moment. What I want to do right now is I want to talk about the things which are objectively accurate, something which we can go and see about them, and we can look at, maybe not from a biblical perspective, but more from a general synchromystic perspective, some of the strange things that are occurring, and then I'll wrap this up at the end, or conclude this with what at least makes sense to me is a way to meet what we're seeing. So, all right. So the eclipse, the Devil Comet, Chiron, Cahokia harmonic convergence. I've actually talked about Cahokia harmonic convergence quite a bit, so I'm not going to go into it here. But there's a there, meaning that this eclipse is certainly tied into through location and through celestial alignments to a certain location, and there was a moment in time where humanity collectively was connected to where the big X of this eclipse, where its line crosses the line of the 2017 eclipse. You know, that's why I talked about the Cahokia and the harmonic convergence. If you're not, I don't want to rehash that. I've made quite a few videos about that. You can go back and look at those. I want to talk mostly a little bit more about what exactly the more specifics of the eclipse, so you can understand it a little bit better from an astronomical and an astrological perspective, and then talk about Comet, the Devil Comet, and Chiron, because these are special and unique, this Devil Comet and Chiron. But let's get into it. So, comets have been observed by humanity for thousands of years, but only in the past few centuries have they been studied as astronomical phenomena. Before modern times, great comets caused worldwide fear and were considered bad omens foreboding disaster and turmoil. Likewise, solar eclipses have caused fear, inspired curiosity, and have been associated with, they're bad omens. So we've got comets as bad omens, we've got solar eclipses as bad omens, and we got a double happening on April 8th. Everyone deep in their hearts is waiting for the end of the world to come. You know, this is very Freudian and, our subconscious death wish. I think there's a truth to that in a way. That's another topic, but I think it serves, our desire to be pulled into fear porn. But let's go into what I'm talking about specifically about the comets and the eclipse. Let's first begin by, let me go and explain exactly what an eclipse is, because one of the ways which I think we can navigate a lot of this stuff is we become clear with what we know, what we can know, and so that we can really appreciate what truly is the mystery, what we can't know. And so the stuff which we can know, we can demystify so that doesn't add to the confusion. So an eclipse of the moon or the sun can occur when the nodes align with the sun roughly every 173 days. Lunar orbit inclination also determines eclipses. Shadows cross when the nodes coincide with the full and new moon. So, all right, so an eclipse occurs somewhere on Earth roughly every 173 days. Really like twice in a solar cycle, there will be an eclipse. And eclipses come in pairs. Like when you have a lunar eclipse, then you're going to have a solar eclipse, usually about 14 days apart, and they have to do with the new moon. The new moon and the new moon and a full moon and their relationship to the lunar nodes. So this here is the symbol of a lunar node, the north node. There's a south node and there's a north node. I'm not going to get into explaining kind of like what the nodes are. We'll just know that the nodes are a thing, and they're really locations. They don't hold mass. They don't hold weight. But we can see right here, this is what the node looks like. And this right here is the astrological chart of the eclipse, April 8th, 2024, Southern Illinois, 2 p.m. That's when the eclipse hits there. And I'm going to show you, like, this is what, when you look at an astrological chart, this is a very, very literal map of what's going on in the heavens. And so let's go look right here. So the solar eclipse happens only on a new moon, and what that means, or what is happening when there's a new moon, is the moon and the sun are in the same location. So this is the symbol of the moon, and this is the symbol of the sun, and you could see they're both in the same location, 19 degrees Aries. when you see a degree and a sign, it's talking about a location in the sky. And so this right here is the North Node, and we see the North Node is at 15 degrees Aries. So they're just 4 degrees away. So when the moon and the sun coincide with the node, that's when you have an eclipse. So this is our eclipse. We got an eclipse because there's a new moon. The new moon, meaning the moon and the sun are conjunct, and they're conjunct in the same place as the node is. The previous new moon was probably around here, and it was too far away to have an eclipse. It was near the node, but it wasn't close enough to have an eclipse. And then the next new moon will be around here in the sky, and in another 30 days, approximately 30 days after April 8th. So, early mid May would be the next new moon. And that new moon would be in Taurus and tropical. And likewise, when the next new moon is going to be down here, opposite the, where the south node is, that'll be about 173 days from April 8th, and that'll be the next eclipse. That's kind of like the mechanism of eclipses. That's how they know when eclipses are happening. But what makes this eclipse so interesting is the fact that there is a comet visible in the sky at this same time. A devil comet with 2 distinctive horns is flying towards Earth. The enormous and rare cold volcano was last visible on Earth in 1953. Comet 12P Pons Brooks comes near the sun every 71 years. Its next sweep past our star will be April 2024. So I don't know when this tweet came out. They're probably talking about that. They usually talk about the comets maybe 6 months beforehand. So they're saying in April 2024, which then coincides with April with our eclipse. And as we said, we've got comets, which are considered to be bad omens, and we've got eclipses to be bad omens. And now we've got like an eclipse and a comet to be occurring at the same time. And not only that, they're calling it the Devil's Comet. Now, the reason why they're calling it the Devil's Comet is because they say, well, it's got 2 horns, and 2 horns look like the devil. 2 horns can look like anything. You can go, there are many, many ways what you could call this shape of the comet, but by calling it the Devil's Comet, that certainly plays in, I don't know who coined that phrase, but it certainly plays into the fear porn which we're talking about. So let's look a little bit more specifically. So on April 21st, it will appear it being the comet will appear in the constellation Taurus and will be best visible in the evenings from the northern hemisphere, where it will appear close to the west-northwest horizon. April 21st is being pulled out specifically because that is when the comet is going to be most visible. The comet is visible right now. It's visible with binoculars. I haven't looked with binoculars. It is possibly visible with the naked eye, and I've been looking for it, but I haven't been able to see it. But let me go and explain, what we're talking about here. So it says that the comet will appear in the constellation Taurus in April 21st. It says right up here, the constellation Pisces is where the Devil Comet is currently flying and will make its way through the other constellations through mid-April. This was probably written in January, would be my guess. So, okay. So right here is a star map, and this thing is called the ecliptic. You see this line here? This is the ecliptic. The ecliptic is, from our perspective on Earth, the path which the sun and more or less the moon and all the planets, they cross. They cross the ecliptic. That's where we see them in the sky. That band of sky is called the ecliptic, and we are able to identify the different parts of the ecliptic by the stars around it, and the stars have been grouped into constellations. So we could see right here, here's the ecliptic, here's the line. This right here is Virgo, it says September, and what it means is the sun is here in September, and then this right here is Leo, the constellation Leo, and then this is Cancer, and this is Gemini, and this is Taurus, and this is Aries, and this is Pisces. So when this was written, it said that the comet was right there. And when April 21st, it'll be Taurus, like around Taurus. So one of the ways, if you don't know the constellations, most people are able to identify Orion. Orion is a very easy to identify constellation. Here's Orion right here. Orion is right by the ecliptic, and Orion is found more or less between Gemini and Taurus. So if you could go out and see Orion, you know that you're basically looking at the ecliptic, and you're looking where Taurus and Gemini are in between. And we know that in April that the constellation, or that the Devil Comet is going to be somewhere in Taurus right here. So let's go back and look at our eclipse map. So this here, when you see all of these signs, all they're showing you is the ecliptic. This is a map of the ecliptic. They made it a circle. Here they spread out. If you were to go and see the completion of this diagram, you could see these diagrams. They're pretty common for sky watchers. You'll see it goes to like it's a sine wave. It goes underneath, and you'll see the other signs of the zodiac, and they'll go underneath. And if you were to go and loop that piece of paper together, that would be a circle, and that's what we see with the zodiac. And you know, these are the constellations. Whenever you see one of these maps here, or these astrological charts, this is a map, and at the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position is always the AC, or the ascendant and the descendant, and this is always the ascendant-descendant line is the horizon, the east-west horizon. So I kind of made this a little bit more, I made this a little bit easier to understand. So if this is the horizon, that's why I put this green here. This is Earth, and this is you standing on Earth at the eclipse at 2 o'clock on April 8th. This is the part of the sky you can see. The top half of the circle is always the part of the sky which you can see. This might be a little bit confusing. This is in tropical. This is in sidereal. I'll explain why I did this in sidereal in a moment. But this is what you're going to see. So it's 2 o'clock. The MC right here is the midheaven, and this refers to the highest part of the arc. So the sun rises here, it goes to the highest part of the sky, and it begins to set. This is where the sun crosses beneath the western horizon when it sets, and this is the highest part in the sky. This is 2 p.m. This is when the eclipse happens. So the sun is a little bit past the highest part in the sky, which makes sense. It's 2 p.m., and this is where the eclipse is going to occur. And when the eclipse occurs for like 3 minutes, it's going to be totally dark out. So like it's going to look like it's nighttime. It's going to look nighttime. And if you were to go and look a little bit to the east at this time, you're like, oh, it's the eclipse. Look at the eclipse. Oh, look at the eclipse right here. And then you turn your head and you looked over where Taurus would be. You'd see the Devil's Comet. The Devil's Comet would be right here. Like, that's what's happening. I don't know how technical I want to make this. The reason I have this in sidereal is because sidereal is a little bit more accurate in terms of where the heavenly bodies are relative to the actual constellations. Tropical does not does not align up perfectly with the constellations. So that when this says that April 21st, it will be in the constellation Taurus, this is written from an astronomical perspective, meaning that they're using the IAU boundaries. So you've got the tropical zodiac, the sidereal zodiac, and the IAU. If you don't know your astrology or your astronomy, this can be really confusing. And so I'm kind of like pausing in my thought because I'm like, I don't want to confuse everyone. But for those of you who do know what I'm talking about, this is the reason why I did this, to be more accurate. So if they're saying that the Devil's Comet is in Taurus, I got to go and I used a sidereal placement. Like this will show more accurately the distance from the sun, or where the eclipse will be, to where the Devil Comet will be in the sky. Because if I did tropical, it would make it seem that the eclipse and the sun and the comet are more close than they actually are. Anyway, the point I'm just trying to make is it's a really, really like uncommon occurrence that when the eclipse happens, you're actually going to be able to see a comet in the sky as well. And these are traditionally, there's significant events in the sky. Again, I'm not saying I think anything bad's going to happen. I don't think that at all. I think all of that is like fear-mongering, superstition invented primarily by priest class, which utilize their knowledge of the heavens in order to continue their mind control over the masses. But that being said, there still is mystery, and there is something significant about a marker in the sky, which breaks up the normal day-to-day unfoldment of the experience of life in linear time. So, all right, let's talk about this. We'll go and look at this comet a little bit more. 12P Pons Brooks. It has an orbital period of 71 years. I found that to be really interesting. And the reason why I found that really interesting is it's not exactly a perfect bullseye, but it's really close because it's 71 years. And we're talking astrology a little bit, and we're also talking time. And I've made reference in other videos about the difference about the great year. When it's talked about like the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces, these ages, they're talking about the great year. And the great year is supposedly caused by the Earth's wobble. And what they say is the Earth makes one full rotation in its wobble. And how it's always explained by astrophysicists, whether or not this is accurate or not, I don't know, but this is what they tell us, is that imagine the Earth is like a spinning top, which isn't spinning tightly but has a wobble. So it's spinning on its axis fast, but it's also wobbling, and that wobble is what creates the great year. And it takes about 25,000 years to make a full rotation, and this is measured through the precession of the equinoxes. I talked about this in another video. But what is said is that the great year moves 1 degree every 72 years. 72 is a precessional number. For those of you who are interested in like Graham Hancock or, that type of inquiry into like the ancients and their understanding of time, they talk about precessional numbers very frequently, and the basis of it is 72 years. It's my opinion why they always say that the human life expectancy is 72 years. They say the average resting heartbeat is 72 beats per minute. Who cares about the average life expectancy? Like, I mean, that's a misnomer. Like, that number changes based upon a whole bunch of variables, and like there isn't like a standard resting heart rate, but always bringing it back to 72 is always tying in the human being to the precessional equinox. And this comet, like, I'm not denying there's a precession of the equinox. I'm just, if anything, it is a manipulation of natural phenomenon into a story for control's sake. Maybe not even for control's sake, but just for the just one perspective of how life works. And what I'm really trying to do right now is highlight, like, there are truths, observable truths, and then there are narratives that are tied to these truths, and the narratives provide meaning, and it is from that meaning, when those meanings are internalized, is when we begin to act out internalized stories. I mean, this is the nature of our mystery. This is the nature of life experience. This is a consciousness-driven experience, and consciousness is an inner world, outer world link. What matters is where you're putting your attention outside of yourself, and then how you're defining it. And so that's what these narratives are so important. That's why indoctrination is so important, is it gets everyone defining external phenomena the same way. So that being said, like, we got 71 years. This is a real comet, supposedly. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't alive 71 years ago. I just trust them when they tell me that there was life 71 years ago. But this lines up. It lines up with precession. So to me, I'm like, okay, that's a thing there. There's something significant. I'm just paying attention to that. All right. Let's continue to move on. So we're going to talk about Chiron. We're talking about Chiron. Chiron is a small solar system body in the outer solar system. So why am I bringing up Chiron? So we've got this eclipse. We've got this eclipse which is happening. We know it's an eclipse that's happening because the sun and the moon are conjunct. That is the language, the astrological and astronomical languages. They're in the same place. They're conjunct, which is a new moon, and they are close to the node. That is what gives us, you see here in sidereal, it has it at 24 degrees, and the north node is at 20 degrees. They're 4 degrees apart, and because the new moon is next to the north node, we have ourselves an eclipse. But we also have this symbol right here, and it's also at 24 degrees. Here it says Pisces, 19 in tropical, it's 19 degrees Aries. And this is what you need to understand. This is the same part of the sky. Like, whether you want to call this 19 degrees Aries or you want to call this 24 degrees Pisces, it's still the same distance from the midheaven. The midheaven doesn't change, and it's the same distance from the western horizon. The signs change based upon the system you use, but what is objectively true and what doesn't change is their relationship to each other and to the fixed markers, the midheaven and the horizon. But we also have Chiron. This is the symbol of Chiron, and Chiron is right there. So now we have what makes this eclipse so unique is, eclipses happen every 173 days. We talked about all of the uniqueness about how the eclipse is going across the United States and about how it crosses with it's making an intersection with an eclipse that went across the United States in 2017, and where that intersection takes place. It's, there's a lot of neat stuff or interesting stuff or like tangible history that has taken place there, specifically the Coyhoca mound site, the ancient city, and then also the harmonic convergence that took place there. And now we've got the Devil Comet, which is visible here, and now we've got Chiron, which is in the same place. If we really want to define this eclipse, I would say it is a Chiron eclipse. Why? Because Chiron is adjacent there, and typically, you don't. I mean, it's less likely that you're going to be conjunct with another heavenly body. I mean, obviously it happens, but there's a lot of variables that are in play right now. So let's go look at Chiron. So, where are we here? So, it was discovered in 1977 by Charles Kowal. It was the first identified member of a new class of objects known as centaurs, and these are bodies that orbit between the asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt. although it was initially called an asteroid and classified only as a minor planet with the designation of 2060 Chiron. In 1989, it was found to exhibit behavior typical of a comet. Today, it is classified as both a minor planet and a comet, and is accordingly known by the cometary designation of 95P Chiron. Chiron is named after the centaur Chiron in Greek mythology. All right, let's keep going with this. So Chiron, it was discovered November 1st, 1977, and this guy got to name it, this guy, Charles Kowal, and he named it after the Greek, he named it after the centaur Chiron from Greek mythology, and that's where it gets its name. And the reason why it's called a centaur is because the reason he named it is because centaurs is the name of small solar system bodies that orbit the sun between Jupiter and Neptune, which Chiron is. All right. Where do we want to go with this? I'm going to first go here. Nope. We're going to go here. So now we're going to talk about Chiron in astrology. So Chiron in astrology is known as the wounded healer. The reason why Chiron in astrology is known as the wounded healer, because Chiron in astronomy, because the guy who discovered it is an astronomer, and he named it because these type of heavenly bodies are known as centaurs, and he was like, he's playing upon this centaur theme, and he calls it Chiron, who was like he was the most just and the highest centaur in Greek mythology. And then in the astrology world, it has been taken to Chiron as an astrological occurrence, has the qualities associated with the Greek character it is named after. So in astrology, Chiron is known as the wounded healer and is considered to represent our deepest emotional and spiritual wounds. It is associated with the archetype of the healer or shaman and represents our ability to transform pain and suffering into healing and growth. So Chiron means that in astrology because the Greek myth, which it's named after, Chiron was the wounded healer in Greek mythology from thousands of years earlier. He was a wise and noble centaur Chiron, and he suffered a painful, incurable wound and inspired many a Greek hero to reach his full potential. Like the myth of Chiron, the wounded healer. This article here is all about Chiron, the mythology, not Chiron in astrology. Yet Chiron, the astrological in astrology, it only has its astrological significance because it was named by this astronomer, Chiron. And if the astronomer would have chosen, he's like, I'm going to name it Hercules, because if you discover it, you get to more or less name it whatever you want. Then following this logic, the logic in astrology, then Chiron, an astrological body, would have a completely different sort of implication. And this is, I'm really talking to the people who listen to this who are familiar with astrology, because Chiron's a big deal in astrology, and Chiron's a big deal in someone's natal chart. And it is just that. It deals with, our woundedness. And Chiron was only discovered in 1977. 1976, astrologers weren't talking about Chiron. And it only has this meaning because it was named a certain way. That should point out the subjectivity, the theoretical subjectivity as it relates to astrology. This is one of the things which I point out all the time with why signs really don't matter so much, because they're so subjective, whether it's tropical or sidereal, whether it's 13 sign or 12 sign that you're following, it can change. that being said, as someone who is, a professional astrologer, I know that there's an accuracy. There's an accuracy in astrology. And so that is not, when I'm talking about, Chiron, the astrological body, only has its meaning because of the fact that its discoverer chose to name it Chiron, and theoretically, if he chose to name it something else, it would have a different meaning. This is not to say that there is not significance and accuracy in terms of understanding one's natal chart from a astrological perspective. What I think it really, what this is pointing out is the nature of our reality and how reality begins to render itself around the meaning which we are internalizing. This is why I say that this is a consciousness-driven realm, and the most significant things with our consciousness is where we're putting our attention and how we're defining it. And something magical, something mystical, mystery is probably better than magical, is a better description. The mystery is like, why does this work? I don't know, but it works. It's anchoring. It's PTSD. It's like things take on, a phenomenon takes on meaning out of expectation. Okay. So all right. So let's go back though. I mean, this is just going to get more and more fun, in my opinion. So all right. Chiron was discovered in 1977. 1977 was a really interesting year. 1977 is when Apple became a real company. The Apple I computer was sold before 1977, but it was 1977 when Apple became an actual computer company. Before, it was just a program circuit board, and then the Apple II, that's the first computer that came with a monitor and a keyboard. And 1977 is considered the birth of the personal computer. Commodore and Texas Instruments both introduced personal computers in 1977 as well. But there is no more Texas Instruments computers. There is no more Commodore. But Apple, as we know, is the, still the dominant leader in personal computing. 1977. Star Wars, 1977. If we look at our modern culture and we look at the influence of Hollywood and movies, there is no movie franchise that has a greater influence across more generations than Star Wars, and this all began in 1977. So May 1977, Star Wars, Star Wars, right? Then Apple, we've got Apple right here, June 1977. Then we got Chiron was discovered in November 77. So let's switch gears a little bit right now, because we're going to make this a little bit more contemporary. March 29th, Gregorian calendar, what has just happened? We've got the whole Key Bridge thing. The Baltimore Key Bridge collapsed. And there's a lot to be talked about in that. I'm not going to go deep into it, but I want to point out that the Key Bridge opened also in 1977. The Key Bridge is another 1977 event. Interestingly, so we've got the Key Bridge, which opened March 23rd, 1977, and it collapsed on March 26, 2024, exactly 17,117 days. Maybe there's another 77 for, you number folks. We got a 7 in there, 77 happening in there. But why this gets really interesting is because we're talking about Chiron, right? And this is the symbol of Chiron. We can see Chiron right here. Here's Chiron. This is the symbol of Chiron. And Chiron is a stylized key. Chiron is a key. Right? Chiron is a key. Chiron is a key. Chiron, empowering astrology, the key. Here is Chiron retrograde, the key. Chiron the sign, the key. Chiron is the key. Here's the Key Bridge, 1977, right? All right, so I'm just going to drop this in, just have a little fun with this. So this is our guy, Charles Kowal. This is him right here, discovering Chiron. I don't know. He looks strangely like Dennis or Randy Quaid. This is Randy Quaid. This is Randy Quaid. I think they look a lot alike here. Here's Randy Quaid in the movie Independence Day. And his character protected the earth from alien harvesters. He destroys the mother alien ship. He was the hero. He was the hero of Independence Day. This Independence Day, they came and they blow up the bridges. Here's our bridge, the Key Bridge. I'm just being fun with this. I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying that they're completely linked. But what I do want to point out about this, and where it gets really strange, is, you know, this tanker which brought down this bridge in, you know, seemingly controlled demolition fashion, was named Dali. And Salvador Dali, the famous surrealist painter, is probably best known for this piece right here, The Persistence of Memory, which is really this melting time, these melting time clocks. So now we're dealing with time again. We're dealing with time. We're dealing with, like, you know, we're just looking at all the variables. We're looking at all the pieces of this puzzle, all the stuff which is going on. And it's, you know, it's weird. It's strange. You know, again, I don't think anything bad is going to happen. I don't think anything bad is going to happen. There was so many other seemingly things that were leading up in our recent past, which would indicate bad things would happen, and no bad things happen. But we are seeing markers in time, and we're seeing strangeness in the nature of our reality. And, you know, in my opinion, we are seeing whether it's purposeful bleed through of other story of timelines or manipulations of timelines. Who knows? That's for each of us to ponder ourselves. But let's bring this up. So as I indicated before, that eclipses always come in two pairs. Then eclipses come, the full moon and the new moon, which are closest to a nodal point. So this is the new moon. The eclipse that is connected to this one happened about 14 days earlier, and it wasn't on a new moon, but it was on a full moon. And that eclipse, and it was a lunar, that makes it a lunar eclipse, and that happened on March 25th, 2024. That was when that eclipse occurred. So this is when that eclipse occurred. It was March 25th, exactly 3:12 a.m. is when the eclipse occurred, or was occurring in Baltimore time. And as we could see right here, the moon and the sun are completely opposite each other. 5 degrees Aries, 5 degrees Libra. So a full moon is when the moon and the sun are opposite. A new moon is when the moon and the sun are in the same location. We see they're at the exact same place, and here they are right next to the node, and that's why it was a lunar eclipse. So when did the Dali hit the key? When did the Dali hit the Chiron, the wounded healer? Well, it hit on Tuesday, March 26th at 1:28 a.m., so less than 24 hours later. What I find most interesting about this is when you go and you see, there's a little bit, the moon and the sun, they're in constant movement, and the sun moved from 5 degrees to about 22 hours later, it was at 6 degrees, and then the moon moved from 5 degrees to 16 degrees. It moved 11 degrees in arc, so the moon moves much faster. But where the moon was when the dolly hits the key was exactly at 16 degrees Libra. And the north node has a south node. They're two nodes, and they're always 180 degrees apart from each other. So it's completely opposite this. So that would mean if the north node was at 15 degrees, the south node would be at 15 degrees Libra, which is where the moon was when the dolly hit it. For those of you who know about astrology, the south node is said to represent the past, and the north node represents the future. We're dealing with time here. We know that Salvador Dali certainly likes to deal with the concept of of melting time and the flexibility in time, which is what we're always talking about here also in this Susquehannaalchemy channel. Also interesting, worthy to point out, is that on March 25th, or this article was at least updated on March 25th, 2024, was that CERN scientists announced that they discovered a 4D phantom. The mysterious entity and ghost-like structure are misleading characterizations of magnetic resonance described in the article. Magnetics are well understood, allowing them to capture and calculate the characteristics that can alter the paths of particles. Whatever this means, there was something interesting going on at the same time. We're dealing with time, right? All right. So a couple more interesting things, or unusual things I want to point out about what's going on with the eclipses and Chiron and the key and all that's happening right now. So, all right. So our comet, our devil comet, Comet 12P, was discovered in 1812. So we're seeing it in 2024. It was seen in 1950 something. It was seen in the 1880s, and it was first discovered in the 1812. But 1811 was the year of the Great Comet. It was the year of the Great Comet. Now, I'm not suggesting these are the same comets. I'm just saying, like, we're just looking at similarities. We're just looking at all the variables that are in play. And the Great Comet of 1811 was considered rather significant. And it was tied into the New Madrid earthquakes, because it was visible in the sky in the New Madrid earthquakes. I'm not going to suggest that happened. I am suggesting weird stuff is in play. 2 years after the 1812 comet was 1814. 1814 was when the Star-Spangled Banner was written. Star-Spangled Banner is the national anthem of the United States, and it was written by Francis Scott Key. As we all know, that Francis Scott Key is who the Key Bridge is named after. It's named after Francis Scott Key because he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, and he wrote it while he was in the Baltimore Harbor. And this bridge, it really encapsulates the Baltimore Harbor. I mean, from other perspectives, one of the things that has happened by the collapse of this bridge is it's made the Baltimore Harbor inaccessible. All ships that are inside the harbor are at least temporarily unable to leave, and no ships are able to go in, And we can see that the Star-Spangled Banner was written basically in the same general time frame. I mean, we're looking at a 3-year period, 1811 to 1814. But we're seeing they're in play, and we talked about the Star-Spangled Banner. We talked about Star Wars. We're talking about stuff in the stars. What's the line in the Star-Spangled Banner? The rockets, red glare. I don't know, that sounds like a comet to me as well. Who knows? All this stuff's in play. The comet of 1811, it was apparently visible during the New Madrid earthquake. You know, people are talking about this. In 1981, a 1,700-mile crack across America was discovered using modern-day gravity mapping satellite. It is referred to as the Montana to Florida lineament or the Missouri gravity low. This crack, seen in blue, intersects with the New Madrid fault line, which is represented in black. So here's the New Madrid fault line. Here's the lineament line. And what's interesting is that these fault lines and the path of the Great American Eclipse that takes place on the 2017 and 2024 are identical. So these lines here are identical to those. You know, I don't know, but this corresponds to 1811 comet. We've got these comets here. We've got the comet, which is going to be visible in the sky on this date, in the location of you know, Cahokia and very close to New Madrid. All these sort of things are happening. All of these things are in alignment. Maybe something will happen. Who knows? I think it's the probability based upon, you know, all the other stories and fear-mongering which has happened in the past is it's unlikely anything's going to happen. But there is arguably, you know, undoubtedly, I don't know, there is something, there's something here. And so the question is like, well, what do you do with this? What do you do with all this information? I mean, let's go back to the most basic point. Life is a mystery. This is literally a mystery. We don't know where we are. We don't know how we got here. We don't know what here is. There are many, many stories. There's no way to know what story is true. We don't know if these are all different. All the stories are different interpretations of the same major story. I don't know. But we can observe and bring awareness. I mean, the one thing which we know for certain is which this experience is crystal clear on, is like how to participate in the paradigm. Don't pay attention to anything else. Just pay attention to how you go, and you are a human resource in the paradigm. That's the one thing which we can say for certain. But for me, you know, in my opinion, what we do with this information is we look at this as there's so many indications, there's so many signs that point to taking a moment out of the unfoldment of life, of your regular life, of the paradigm life, of the things which you need to do in order to, you know, pay for your survival, that sort of stuff. And, you know, I'll bring this back to the River and Stars ceremony. So the River and Stars ceremony is, as indicated in the past, is the arrow circulation, like all the sort of stuff that I've been talking about for the past year, of bringing Susquehanna River water to all these key places, going around, building the starboard, practicing natural astrology. So that is an awareness of the heavens and the ability to map it on a map of the zodiac, the starboard, to be able to identify what you're looking at on the board in the sky, to be able to honor the mystery of life without necessarily falling into any sort of limitations of interpretations, just bringing awareness to the experiment. this is the arrow circulation river and stars ceremony. And where we're beginning this, where we'll be on April 8th, and not in celebratory format, but in reverence of life, in reverence of all of the inversion of the normalcy of how we live. And the normalcy, what I mean by that is like living in conflict with our environment, living in conflict with each other, in a domination model, like that's normalized, but it doesn't, that's not the only way which life exists in this realm. Like trees do not dominate, and they are enormously, they're enormous physical, material, living things, but they don't have to destroy something to live. There are actual models of other ways in which life exists on this earth, besides the domination, Darwinian survival of the fittest, apex predator model. That's a consciousness ploy. That is a false narrative which has been indoctrinated in us. And so on April 8th, at least what I'll be doing, and what I invite anyone else who wish to come and join us, is we'll be right here at the oldest river on the planet, right at Sunbury, right here. Sunbury, where the sun is buried, aka the eclipse location. Same place I was in the 2017 eclipse. And we'll be doing a river and stars ceremony. Sunbury, Pennsylvania is where the first building that was lit with Edison's 3-wire system in 1883. Let me do the math. So 71 plus 71 plus 1812 brings us to 1883. That was 1883. That was another time when the comet was visible. That's crazy. I didn't even think about that until this moment right now. We are bringing awareness to the alignments of the mystery of this life, and we're reflecting back into it. And then life will go on. Life will go on after that moment. But we're taking a moment and a pause out of the unfoldment of the paradigm time to be aware of the phenomena in the sky, the phenomena on the earth, and the stories that are being told to us. And possibly bringing in a Chiron-like reconciliation of this, this experience which we've all been born into. This is where we're going to be. This is Chiron. We'll be right here on this island, right where the Susquehanna River, the West Branch and the North Branch come together. If you haven't seen the Sunbury presentation that Christy put out, where she really goes into like this island and why this location is so significant, and the keystone which has been laid right here, I'd highly recommend you to see that video. If you can come out and join us here, reach out. Follow the link which is going to be in this video. You register through the GoFundMe site if you want to support us in doing that. You could also do that in the GoFundMe site. But that's what I got to share with you guys. That's the video. That's the talk on the eclipse. Nothing to fear. We bring awareness. We bring a reverence to life. We bring a conscious focus upon the direction which we're not going to go in. and a conscious awareness to the direction, or at least the mystery, which we find ourselves experiencing. So that, my friends, I hope you all are well, and this is mkwann checking out.